Gordon, your reaction?
Well, first of all, it's nice to say that we're going to try to have a stable relationship with China. But the point is, China's political system is in turmoil. And I don't know how you have any sort of relationship with a regime like that. So China is going to make itself a priority, regardless of what we say in our strategy documents. China is going to provoke us. And it is going to become the top priority. So this is nice that we say this, but it doesn't take into account the reality of what's occurring in East Asia right now. And yes, it's good that we have that Greenland Framework Agreement. That's a real start to the defense of the American homeland and indeed all of North America.
Very important. The president walked us through that last week in that interview from Davos. Gordon, thank you so much. Good to see you. Gordon Chang, stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. President Trump rolling out his 2026 affordability agenda aimed at driving costs down for American households. The president targeting lower rates, focusing on mortgage rates and credit card rates. He's calling for a one-year 10% cap on credit card interest rates beginning January 20th. He's also ordering Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to buy $200 billion in mortgage bonds to push mortgage rates lower. The president signaling support for the American homebuyer with a new order restricting large investors from buying single-family homes. Joining me now is White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Kevin, great to have you this morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Well, this is a whole bunch of efforts on the part of the president and your team to try to lower costs. Let's go through some of them. The ban on large institutional investors purchasing single-family homes. How much of an impact has that had on the supply of homes, Kevin?
Right. Well, nationwide, it depends on what you think a large institutional investor is. That there are some definitions that it's people who own more than 100 homes, some definitions that it's people who own more than 1,000 homes. But if you go to the 100-home definition, then you're looking at, in some places, up to 20% of the market is owned by institutions. Now, the institutions have a tax advantage over ordinary home buyers in the sense that they get to write off the depreciation on the home as they're holding it and renting it. And so it basically makes like the tax rules put people out of the running when they want to compete with an institutional investor. And it's something that President Trump just doesn't think is right. And I think that what we're likely to see is an executive order that describes what an institutional investor is, what a single family home is. And then when that comes out, there'll be a clear guidance to people about when they can feel free that they're playing on a level playing field when they're competing for a home.
Kevin, this 10% cap on credit card interest rates obviously has the banks talking, and a lot of them are very worried about this. This new potential card cap could wipe out the earnings from the card portfolios for a year. Those are the expectations there. If applied to all cards, analysts say it would hurt large bank pre-tax earnings by between 5 and 18%. And wipe out earnings for the monolines like a Cap One Financial. Your thoughts on the president putting this in place? Obviously, Congress would have to codify this for law. Will these banks be forced to follow this?
Well, I think, we've been in conversations with the big banks, with CEOs of many of the big banks, who think that the president's onto something, that he's got a great idea that they could potentially voluntarily provide for people who are in that sort of sweet spot of not having financial leverage very much because they don't have access to credit, but they have enough income and stability in their lives so that they're worthy of credit. And so our expectation is that it won't necessarily require legislation because there'll be really great new trump cards presented for folks that are voluntarily provided by the banks.
And then there's a significant move on mortgage-backed securities with the president calling for $200 billion in purchases. Not technically quantitative easing, but the GSEs are the buyers and not the central bank. Talk to us about this. How significant the move would you expect in mortgage rates as a result of this move from the president?
Well, this is a move that was very much supported by Secretary Bessent and Bill Pulte, who runs Fannie and Freddie. And the basic idea is that if you get the spread down on the interest rate for mortgages, then you help people get cheaper mortgages. And we've seen a pretty big reaction to the announcement, and I think that actually makes us all feel better, because the truth is that fewer people are buying homes right now than we've seen pretty much in my lifetime. And the reason is that we had runaway Biden inflation, and then the Fed lifted interest rates so much that mortgage rates went through the roof, and the typical monthly payment about doubled for an ordinary family buying an ordinary home, and the down payment they needed to buy a home went from about $15,000 to about $32,000. And so there's a real lot of room to make up, and we've got a whole bunch of policies that are going to help people do that. You know, the one you didn't mention that we're also talking about, and the president will put the final plan out in Davos next week, I'll be flying up there with him, is that we're going to allow people to take money out of their 401ks and use that for down payment.
Oh, well, that's interesting, to take money out of your 401k. Do you worry that taking money out of the 401k is going to hurt people on the other side for retirement?
Well, what you have to do is come up with a way, so a simple way, we're still talking about the mechanics of it, but suppose that you put 10% down on a home, and then you take 10% of the equity of the home and put it in as an asset in your 401k, then your 401k will grow over time as the value of your house grows. You'll be healthy, have more money for retirement, and you'll have solved the liquidity constraint problem and gotten yourself a house early in life.
Wow, that's an interesting move. We'll be waiting for the president to give us more details next week. Kevin, there's a lot of things that the president has announced as a result of this affordability push, and I want to get your take on the impact. What kind of economic growth would you expect in the first half of the year? We've been talking a lot about the idea of 5% GDP. Where are you at?
Yeah, I think that right now, if we look at productivity, it's running at about 4%. And then usually capital and labor add another couple of percent to growth in a typical year. So if we really keep that 4% productivity, we're looking at one of the best years we've ever seen. And so I have a hard time seeing growth below 4%. And I think we could see some blowout year growth numbers, the annual growth numbers that are things that we haven't seen before. Because, like, look at it this way. In the fourth quarter, we have GDP now saying that it's about 5%. A little bit more, but that's with a 1.5% penalty from the government shutdown. So if there hadn't been a shutdown, then GDP now would be telling us about 6.5%. I mean, those are numbers, Maria, that you and I have rarely seen in our lifetimes.
Wow. The analyst community on Wall Street is also talking about a windfall over taxes once we get through April 15th. Households will likely spend at least 70% of their nearly $200 billion 2026 tax windfall, according to Jake Ubina over at Piper Sandler. What kind of a tax windfall would you expect this tax season?
Right, I think that number is about right. Yeah, I think that's about the right number. I mean, the fact is that the no tax on tips, the no tax on overtime, all of that happened mid-year, and so the IRS didn't really have time to change the tax forms. And so the folks that are in that spot, and also the reduced tax on seniors, that they're going to see it in their refunds. And so our expectation is that you're going to have the biggest refund season ever, which is going to be a significant positive stimulus for the economy. But I will add a non-inflationary stimulus, because we've got all the supply going up too. We've got $18 trillion in new factory construction and so on. And so I think that it's really, the Trump golden age is going to be tested, the theory of it, this year. And I think it's looking pretty good.
That is great. Meanwhile, there's a lot of pushback on this investigation into Jay Powell. A lot of debate over Fed independence following the Justice Department's probe of the chairman over his congressional testimony last June. Global central bankers have stepped in to defend Powell. They're warning that central bank independence is a cornerstone of economic stability. President Trump said this week he has no plans to fire Powell. He only wants lower interest rates. But, I mean, Kevin, did Jay Powell do anything wrong to justify an actual criminal investigation while the president wants lower interest rates?
You know, Maria, we at the White House, we respect the independence of the Fed. You know how much you and I have talked about it. It's absolutely essential for the stability of the economy, and we respect the independence of the Justice Department. The problem is, from the point of view of the circumstance, that the Justice Department was asking the Fed to answer some questions, and they couldn't get their answers. Janine Pirro said that she was asking questions all the way back a few months ago. And so they felt the necessity of doing it this way. I find that regrettable. I certainly hope that there's nothing to see here. But, all corners of government, the Fed, the White House, everything, we have a responsibility to the American people to be transparent. And I think that, if I were Fed chair, that I would insist on transparency. I probably would have answered the questions right away. But the bottom line is, I expect, Jay's a good man. I expect that there's nothing to see here, that the cost overruns are related to things like asbestos, as he says. But I sure wish they had been more transparent.
Well, I mean, the issue is now that the Democrats are so angry over this investigation that they're going to stop progress on the president's nominees. I mean, the president's trying to, move forward toward naming his next chairman of the Federal Reserve. You're on the short list. It could come this month. A prediction market showing this tight race on CAHOKIA. You and Kevin Warsh are the leaders of the pack here. And, of course, we know that the president gave a second interview to Rick Reeder at BlackRock. So we're all trying to understand, where that process is. But, look, at the end of the day, the person has to be confirmed, right? I mean, the Democrats are saying we're not going to move anybody forward, any of the governors, the Federal Reserve. So is this investigation going to hurt the president's agenda and stop its progress?
No, not at all. I mean, the fact is that it's a simple request for information. I'm sure the information will be forthcoming shortly, and then things will move forward. And the people you mentioned, Kevin Warsh, Rick Reeder, they're terrific guys. They'd all be great Fed chairs. The president doesn't have a tough choice, I keep saying, about who the Fed chair is. He has nothing but good choices. And if it were to be me, I've said that I would take the job, and I would take that job with the commitment to Federal Reserve independence and transparency. And I think that that's something that the Fed could have done a lot better in the past.
Has the president spoken to you about what's next for you?
Yeah, we'll leave those conversations between me and the president.
Kevin, we're waiting on this sweeping tariff decision from the Supreme Court, this landmark test in the Supreme Court. The justices signaling a decision on presidential tariff authority in an emergency could come as soon as next week. We've been waiting. The second opinion day came and went, and we didn't get the decision. What are the alternatives should the president see a negative ruling from the Supreme Court and put hundreds of billions of dollars in tariff revenue at risk?
Right. Well, we're highly confident that they're going to side with us, that the legal analysis is on our side. And, we've talked about that on your show before, so I won't have to go into the details of that. But we also have a backup plan that's really solid. We can put a 10% tariff on right away to make up most of the room, and then use things like the 301 authorities, the 232 authorities to backfill the things that we've already achieved with these great deals with the countries. I expect that the Supreme Court is going to be really, really supportive of the president's plan, because look at all of the things that we've created this year. We've got a huge reduction in the deficit. We've got really, really high economic growth, and inflation is way down. If you look at the Consumer Price Index, the last data that we saw showed the core over 3 months at an annual rate at only 1.6%. And so the idea that the tariffs would harm the economy and create inflation has been proven wrong by the data. And I think that the Supreme Court wouldn't want to upend all of that great success either.
Well, the president has used tariffs so effectively, and in terms of ending wars, by the way. But Kevin, you just said immediately we could put a 10% tariff in place. What does that mean? So that wouldn't be under the quote-unquote emergency then?
Yeah, there's a special authority in circumstances like this where there's a 10% tariff that could last for 6 months, which would give you time to sort of iron things out.
And Kevin, do you want to see Congress go for another reconciliation package? It seems the conversation is gaining strength within the Congress, and I know the president has lots of items to perhaps include in a second reconciliation package by year end.
Right. the president is discussing with congressional leaders whether we should do that. I think a lot of us, if you look at like the great ideas to help Americans with their housing issues, believe that a second reconciliation could help us with that. But in the end, I think the majority leader and the speaker are going to have to count the votes and decide whether they can pull it off. But if they can, we'll celebrate here in the White House.
All right, Kevin, great to see you this morning, and we will see you in Davos next week.
Yes,
Thank you so
will.
much. All right, Kevin Hassett at the White House. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Need better internet? Cox Internet has the fast, reliable speeds you're looking for. Get Cox 300 meg internet with a 2-year plan, price lock guarantee, plus equipment included. Switch today. Taxes and fees excluded from price guarantee.
Joining me now, White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Kevin, I just got to ask, I mean, do you think questioning the Fed chair's excessive spending is a threat to the independence of the Federal Reserve?
I think that transparency is something that safeguards the independence of the Fed. I won't comment on like current law enforcement cases, but I could say that the Fed needs to be very transparent at all times, and it needs to be independent. We know that when Federal Reserves lose their independence, that inflation gets out of control and it hurts ordinary folks. We can't ever let that happen. I think that President Trump's view is that he's got policy disagreements with Jay Powell. He thinks that at times it's looked like their decisions have been partisan, like cutting rates right before the election, potentially to help Kamala Harris. Right. And he wants an independent Fed, and that's what he's emphasizing with everybody that he's interviewing for this job. And I got to say, there's a bunch of great candidates. He's really doing a good job having a thorough search.
I did read where you also said there are certain policy decisions that Powell made that you would not have made as well.
Yeah, that's right. And the bottom line is that policy decisions are made, in a difficult situation sometimes. That there's the cloud of war. But if you look at the fact that the Fed has sort of promised to hike rates ahead of President Trump's first election, but then they never did. And then the minute that he was elected, they hiked rates. All that kind of stuff, I think has been observed by the president. Right. And he just wonders, have they lost their way? And I can tell you that whoever the president picks, he's got a bunch of really great experienced candidates that the Fed's going to be independent again.
Kevin, not only does President Trump wonder if the Fed's lost their way, so does the American public. You talk about independence. Well, confidence in the Fed to do the right thing has plummeted from 74%. I think if they update this with the next time, it'll probably be an all-time low. So at what point should the Fed itself take a look, be introspective? I got to be quite frank with you. I've never heard a mea culpa from any Fed official, particularly a chair.
Right. I got to say that if you remember when I was the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors here in the first term, that, we would talk. And I would say, well, I said this thing, but it turns out I was wrong about that. Here's this thing that came a different way than I expected, but now I understand why I got it wrong. And we would have conversations like that. I would even on Twitter post corrections when I said, hey, we thought this was the number, but actually our staff did a miscalculation. This is the actual number. And so I think that the Fed doesn't say where their models come from, doesn't say if they make a mistake, why they made a mistake, and why we should have confidence that they won't make the same mistake again. And I think that that's the thing that's got to change in today's day and age. It's very, very easy to be transparent and truthful, to put your model and your data on the table and admit when you're wrong. Sure. And I think that's what everybody, especially the president, expects right now.
Listen, humility is one of the things everyone agrees that that one of your great characteristics. On the flip side of that may be the idea that as chair, would you be strong enough to control, I would say strong arm, but control other members who may not actually see eye to eye with you?
I'm not going to speculate about exactly what I'm going to do if I do or I don't get the job. The president's going to decide that, and if he does choose me, I've already told him that I would accept.
But a big part of the job is swaying the committee. But I can say I'm
tough enough. I am tough enough to win an argument, and I think anybody who's come to this White House and taken every question you could get for 5 years, which is what I've done, is tough enough to go into a hostile room and help people understand why they're right or they're wrong.
Jay Powell and the Fed probably would say or feel like it's time for them to take a victory lap on a soft landing. But I did read somewhere recently where you say the economy is not booming because of the Fed. So why is the economy booming right now?
Right. Well, the economy is booming. It's really astonishing, right? Like, so if you look at the last 3 quarters, it's 4% growth, and now we're looking at something like 5% growth. And the 5% growth is 1.5% lower than the real number because of the government shutdown. And so we're seeing numbers like we saw right at the beginning of the Reagan administration, a little bit during the dot-com years. But there have been very, very few times in American economic history where things were as strong as they are. And I think that the reason is that President Trump's policies have really, really helped. So if you look at the big, beautiful bill, that we've got expensing, we've got no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime. I think that the other thing that's happening is that the artificial intelligence boom is making productivity go up for firms all around the country. And you saw, like, the latest productivity numbers are showing something like 4.5% productivity gains. That 4.5 goes right into GDP, right? And so that's, I think that's where the boom comes from. I don't think it's really about the Fed, which is basically, the interest rates right now at the Fed are quite a bit higher than they are in most other countries.
Let me throw another Fed hypothetical kind of thing at you if you do get the job. And if you don't, listen, we know the Fed has acquired a lot of power over the years. Now, not all of it's their fault per se. Congress keeps giving up their power. I think, in my opinion, I would love to see, and maybe this is crazy, that Congress should be in charge of inflation. This way, maybe they would stop spending, right? Because there's no accountability, and maybe the Fed should only focus on labor. The point is, though, would you be open to changing any of the mandates or the responsibilities? Because I think the Fed has far too much.
Well, I think the dual mandate has served the Fed well when a nonpartisan Fed has pushed it forward. And the bottom line is low inflation can be politically unpopular, and that's one reason why in 1913 they designed the Fed the way they did. But in 1913 when they designed the Fed, the Fed we were under a gold standard, and so the Fed was basically no one envisioned that they could do all the stuff that they're doing right now. And so I think revisiting exactly what you can do in today's world in the Fed is something that's a reform that should be viewed.
And listen, 1913, they only had inflation. 1978, Congress punted jobs, and then since then they punted everything else under the sun. I want to talk about some other sacred cows: hedge funds, big banks. I know your phone must ring off the hook every time, right? From your old Wall Street friends asking about the caps on credit cards or stopping hedge funds from buying single-family homes. Do you support these policies?
Yeah, absolutely. I support the president's policies. He's trying to make the gains from Wall Street spread to Main Street, and we're all about to go to Davos, and he's going to give a great speech about what he's going to do to get people back into their homes again. And so I think absolutely the president has done a lot of good last year, and we're going to do even more this year. And again, in this big Davos speech that we're preparing right now, he's going to have, I think, a massive, massive fix for the housing market.
Before I let you go, some breaking news out. The Wall Street's been on pins and needles about the Supreme Court and tariffs. It may be a moot point. The U.S. and Taiwan just signed a trade and investment agreement. It's absolutely phenomenal. Commerce Department saying it will drive massive reshoring of America's semiconductor business back. We see semiconductors driving everything these days. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that what's happened is that President Trump and his trade team of Jameson Greer and Secretary Bessent and Howard Lutnick have been making great deals for Americans. We've got something like $18 trillion of commitments for job-creating investments here in the U.S. And I think that more of that is going to be coming all year.
Davos, we know there's the big housing speech. What else can we anticipate?
There's also going to be some look at the new world order that President Trump is creating. And, a lot of countries that were, whining about tariffs 6 months ago and saying that President Trump was going to harm their economies had pretty good years. And I think it's in part because people recognize that President Trump has made it so that we are the shining city on the hill again. We are the engine of global economic growth because the U.S. is really that strong again.
Yeah, and I think he's doing it because he's coloring outside the lines, right? It's just these rigid rules that we've lived by for so long, not necessarily applicable anymore, and certainly have underserved Americans in many cases. Kevin, I appreciate you taking the time. Good luck, my friend.
It's great to be here. Oh, thanks.
See you soon.
But first, there's this. President Trump is en route to Davos right now. After Air Force One was turned back to Washington due to an electrical issue, the president doubled down on his plans to acquire Greenland as world leaders await his speech this morning. Here's the president yesterday.
How far are you willing to go to acquire Greenland?
You'll find out.
What happens to the tariff threat to Greenland if the Supreme Court comes out and rules against you on the tariffs? And
well, I'll have to use something else. I mean,
are
look,
you willing to use force?
you know, take a look at the word license, take a look at other things. I mean, we have other alternatives. But what we're doing now is the best, the strongest, the fastest, the easiest, the least complicated.
Well, this story dominated the conversation yesterday. I was on stage moderating a discussion with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in Davos, and he told me more about the importance and the strategy behind acquiring Greenland. Watch. How do you justify taking over a country when, in fact, Denmark and Greenland have said they are not interested?
Well, Maria, I think the president has a very strong view on Western Hemispheric security and believes that the U.S. should not outsource our national security. He believes that Greenland is essential for the Golden Dome missile shield. The president is worried that if there were an incursion into Greenland, the U.S. would be called upon to defend Greenland. Greenland's becoming more and more attractive for foreign conquest. I tell everyone, sit back, take a deep breath, do not retaliate, do not retaliate. The president will be here tomorrow, and he will get his message across.
Lots of reaction to this. European Union leaders reportedly considering a retaliatory trade bazooka if President Trump follows through with his tariff threats. The president is maintaining he will meet anything Europe does, adding he believes a deal can be worked out in the next few days to make everyone involved happy. Joining me now, right now, on all of that and more, here in Davos is the Commerce Secretary of the United States, Howard Lutnick. Secretary Lutnick, great to see you.
Great to see you.
Thank you so much for being here. So what's your take on all of this? I mean, you've got European leaders saying we're going to do an emergency session. We want to talk about this. They're doing this emergency meeting on Sunday. You've got the Danes saying we're going to start selling U.S. treasuries. How worried are you about this reaction?
I mean, the Europeans should try to remember what it was like in April. Right? They got all excited and it was a big thing. And the president wrote letters and made comments because he wanted them at the table, right? You needed the Europeans at the table, right? And so now that's what he's done. He said, look, you got to pay attention. You got to focus. You got to be at the table for us. And so that's what's going to happen. And Greenland matters to us for national security.
Tell me about Greenland and the national security implications. Why is it so important in terms of national security?
Well, I'll give you an example that's different than Secretary Bessent said yesterday. So the idea is that America has always protected the shipping lanes of the world, right? After World War II, it was America who protected the shipping lanes, right, between Europe and the United States. As the Arctic opens, what do you think is going to happen, right? We need those shipping lanes, and you need to be protected. You can't have Chinese ships or Russian ships while you're coming through, that strait. So America needs to protect it. It's key and part of our national security. The Western Hemisphere is part of our national security, and the president wants to make sure that he's going to protect it. Remember, these trade routes are for Europe just as well. It's not like it's a one-directional thing. These trade routes go both ways.
What would you say if one of our allies said, look, we're going to go in and take over another country, even though the country said we're not interested? I mean, we talk all day and every day about evil action from Putin going into Ukraine. I mean, people are looking at this and saying, how is it possible that the U.S. can acquire another country, even though they're pushing back?
I don't remember Greenland being another country. We're not taking over Denmark. It's just Greenland is in our hemisphere. It's far, far away from Denmark, as we know. And 57,000 people, right, who are close to America, and it's important for us to make sure we protect the Western Hemisphere. The strength of America in the Western Hemisphere is vital for the world. When America shines, the world shines. We showed you that throughout 2025. I think the president's going to come and talk about it. He's going to meet with the European leaders. He's going to talk to them. And my guess is they'll work it out. But he wants them at the table. He wants them serious. And I didn't understand why they sent like a couple of dozen military people to Greenland. I mean, it made no sense whatsoever. I mean, they didn't send those couple of dozen people to Ukraine before Russia came in. So, I mean, I think he felt it was they were just being provocative. And so, if you provoke the president, you're going to get a response.
Well, you're working on a lot of trade issues here, and I want to get to Taiwan in a moment. But are you worried that European leaders are now saying, look, well, maybe we won't do the trade deal that we've already been talking about and negotiating for so long?
No, I think the trade deal that Europe did with the United States is very durable. They don't want to change their auto tariffs. They don't want to change their semiconductor tariffs. And they sure as heck don't want to change their pharmaceutical tariffs. So those things are really, really important to Europe. They matter to Europe. That's why we have the deal in the first place. So I think this is going to be a lot of talking, right? A lot of shaking and a lot of rattling. But in the end, the United States is going to speak to Europe, its great friend and ally, and they will work out a resolution that is suitable for Europe and suitable for the President of the United States. He knows what he's doing, and he is on it. I'm going to leave it to the national security team to work it out. But this is important to America, and if it's important to America, it should be darn important to Europe.
Secretary, you led negotiations between the United States and Taiwan on the latest trade deal alongside U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer. The deal includes a $250 billion investment from Taiwan into American technology, specifically semiconductors. While the U.S. will bring its reciprocal rate on Taiwanese goods down to 15% or less, Taiwan Semiconductor vowing to invest $165 billion to expand production on American soil, including these 3 new chip plants. I want to talk more about this. Well, we talked a little about it with Jameson Greer, and he's going to be here in the 8 a.m. hour. But give us your sense of the importance of this and what this means for national security, this deal that you just did with Taiwan.
So if you don't make chips, you can't have robots, you can't have drones, you can't take care of yourself. So we need to produce semiconductor chips at home to protect ourselves. And when President Trump walked in for a second term, we were producing no leading edge chips. And our objective is when we leave office, we're going to have 40% market share. So we've got Taiwan, right? 2 blocks of $250 billion, right? Their companies are going to come here, TSMC. We gave them credit for $100 billion. So they've got another 150 to go, right? Plus Taiwan's going to put $250 billion toward their small and mid-sized companies. So we bring the whole supply chain from Taiwan here, try to get up to 40% market share, right? And then for the rest, the CHIPS Act, which was small, we doubled its size. We basically spent no more money and doubled its size. We have Micron building $200 billion in America. So we are going to invest $1 trillion in semiconductors in America, get up to 40% market share, and at least be able to take care of ourselves. God forbid we need to.
Well, this is so important on a national security level. I totally understand that. I mean, you've got China on the march, Russia on the march, and the U.S. is reliant on China for all of these things. You're saying, I mean, how is it possible that President Trump is the first president to actually take action on this?
It seems crazy, right? People really slept through everything. I mean, our antibiotics are made in China.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. We can't have an adversary, right, who, God forbid there's a conflict, that we have to rely upon. It just doesn't make sense. So we need to reshore those things. We need to reshore our pharmaceuticals. So when the president is out talking about pharmaceuticals, he's talking about protecting us. God forbid we need it. We learned it all in COVID, right?
Yeah.
Right? We couldn't even get masks. We couldn't get hospital gear. Yeah. It was outrageous. So now we're paying attention to it. And President Trump's the only president who's got the guts, who's got the stamina, says, look, I'm just going to fix the whole thing for America. And that's why it's great to work in this administration. We are literally fixing the things that make no sense in America. We don't make semiconductors. We don't have pharmaceuticals. I mean, come on. We don't do manufacturing. We need to have jobs in America for our great people. Let's bring those jobs back home.
Yeah, and it's incredible to me that it's taken this long to actually do this, and that the president actually had to threaten tariffs in order to get companies to bring their supply chains here, right?
Well, it makes sense, right? Once upon a time, the president always says, once upon a time there was Intel inside. You remember that? We made all the semiconductors. If the president of the United States at the time said, hey, we're going to put a 50% tariff, you got to build it here, then semiconductors would have never left. Instead, we slept through it. We left this globalization model where you should go find the cheapest labor and move to the cheapest labor. And what happened? It all left America. It gutted the industrial base of America. And now we need to bring that home. We need to create those jobs at home. We need to take care of American workers first. And that's what we're all about. We're focusing on American workers. I mean, think about it. What model would have Ford stock up 40%, General Motors up 60%, except when you put Donald Trump in the Oval Office and he says, I'm going to take care of my domestic auto industry. The UAW is on side. Sean Fain, who runs the UAW, he actually called me. And he said, I can't believe I'm calling a Republican Secretary of Commerce to say thank God for you guys. You guys care about the American worker.
Secretary, you just met with the CEO of Intel. Tell us about that. Lip Bouton at the White House just 4 months after the government took a 10% stake in the company. You say that the partnership was already delivering tens of billions in value for the American people. The administration has similar stakes in MP Materials, Lithium Americas, U.S. Steel, and others. You have to explain this to me a little because you're a capitalist. The president is a capitalist. You talk about free market capitalism all the time. And when I interviewed the president for the first time when he came back, second term, it was right after the inauguration, I said to him, Mr. President, what do you want this economy to look like in 4 years? He said, I want the private enterprise to rule the day. How is taking a stake in Intel, MP, telling defense companies not to pay dividends, how's that free market capitalism?
Okay, so let's go over Intel for a moment, right? So I walk in the door. The Biden administration had given, G-I-V-E-N, $10 billion to Intel to build semiconductors in America, which they were already doing. So what I call that is called shareholder Christmas. Right? There's a $100 billion company. They just get $10 billion from the government, and they're not going to build any more semiconductors. So we said, look, we're going to cancel that contract, and I want the $10 billion back. I don't want to give you the $10 billion because that's just not going to work for us. And so we negotiated and we said, okay, you can keep the money that was already signed, sealed, and delivered, and you give us 10% of the equity in the company, right? And now we can help them because we want Intel to be successful in America. It matters to us that we build semiconductors in America. And what's happened? The stock's up 35, 40% since then, right? But remember, the $10 billion was already out the door at zero. So we're up like $30 billion in the United States. I mean, there's nothing wrong with taking care of the American taxpayer once in a while. Everything doesn't have to be a giveaway. So the concept of, isn't this free market? I think this is the definition of free market. Giving away taxpayer money, it just doesn't work for me.
Well, what kind of a shareholder is the government going to be? Are you going to be an activist shareholder? You're going to tell Intel how to spend its money? You're going to tell Intel what to do?
No, but what we do is by us being there and nodding behind them, they know that it's not going anywhere. So you can invest in Intel. You can try. So they, as Lip-Bu just said, right? He said his 18A is doing well and his 14A is doing well. That's 1.8 nanometer. It's basically the most advanced chip ever made in America, and he's doing it successfully. And that's sort of what we want, right? What does America want? We want leading edge chips made in America. So God forbid if we need them for whether it's F-35s or drones or robots, we're making them here so we can protect ourselves.
Secretary, speaking of drones, are we still buying drones from DJI, a Chinese drone maker? I mean, we still have those drones in our arsenal.
So these things are going to end, right? Drones made in China and robots made in China. It's our view. We're doing a study. Right? That's called a 232. We analyze the market, we analyze the study, and then when that is done, we'll come out, we'll recommend to the president what policies and what procedures he can take, and then he'll decide how he wants to do it.
Okay. Speaking of 232, is that an alternative should the Supreme Court go against you? We're waiting on the Supreme Court decision on whether or not President Trump can use tariffs in an emergency. What are you expecting? When are we expecting to get this news from the Supreme Court? And can you come up with an alternative to actually raise that kind of hundreds of billions of dollars in tariff revenue that you've already been able to?
So I was in the courtroom for the Supreme Court argument, and we are going to win the case, right? I listened to the case. We are going to win. It felt really good when I left. When I left, I called the president. I said, you're going to win this case. Wow. So I was there. I listened to the whole thing. So I am pretty confident. But
there were 5 justices that were skeptical about President Trump using it as an emergency.
I think they were skeptical to the other side, to us first. Remember, we went first. So they were very skeptical of us. Right? But then, and then all the newspapers wrote everything and everybody wrote everything. And then they went, and they were more skeptical of the other side. So when I left, I felt good about myself. And each of the justices asked really interesting questions, right? And they said, I'll give you an example. One of the questions was, so let me get this straight. You're saying the President of the United States of America can cut off trade with a country. He can cut it off for zero, but he can't charge them a tariff? So he can't do something less? He said, imagine... this was Brett Kavanaugh. He goes, imagine the Oval Office conversation. Mr. President, we've got a problem with this adversary, and he says, and they say, you can cut him off. He goes, no, I don't want to cut him off. Let's just put a tariff on them. Oh, you're not allowed, sir. It just doesn't make any sense. And that was a Supreme Court justice asking the question. So I think that's what made me feel good, right? There's examples of why we felt good. So I think he's going to win, but Jameson Greer and I, together with our powers, we can help the president execute whatever plan he wants. We got him here. I think we're going to stay here. But if anything changed, the two of us will work together. We have enough power. We will make it work for the President of the United States. And all of our trading partners know tariffs are going nowhere. But I think we win with the Supreme Court.
So even if you don't, you think you can use different sections like Section 232 and 301 or whatever else to raise that kind of money?
Well, as the Supreme Court justices said, if you overturn this, this is going to be one mess. Wow, would it be a mess? And I just don't see them taking the power away from the only person elected by the full United States of America. He should run foreign policy. Let the president run foreign policy. I mean, look what an amazing job he's done. GDP up 4.3%, right? Imports way down. Exports way up. Trade deficit way down. GDP up and our deficit down. I mean, these are all win, 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 win. You got to leave the president with that power. What would be your expectation for economic growth this quarter, first quarter? So I think this quarter, the first quarter of 2026, the United States of America's $30 trillion economy will exceed 5% growth. Wow. 5%. Exceed 5%. And if we get a new Fed chair, which we'll get this summer, and they cut rates, which they should, because why is the greatest credit in the world paying the highest rates? You saw the 10-year, right? We just looked at it. 4.25. We are 200 basis points higher than anybody else in the world, and we're the best credit. Usually you would say, no, the best credit pays the lowest rate, not the highest rate. If they cut that rate, you're going to see the end of 2026. You're going to see 6% growth from the United States of America. Wow. And I tell you what, that fixes a whole lot of stuff, and that's why you put Donald Trump in the Oval Office. Quite a prediction. Real quick before you go, President Trump has been talking about this $19 trillion that he has actually lured to invest into America. When you first came in and you sat down, you were talking about other money that you've been able to raise from various investors and companies. What is that number? Okay, so Japan gave us $550 billion, and we're focused on building power. Right? We all know we need these data centers in America. We're going to build power, but we're going to do it in two ways. Not only are we going to build data centers, but we're going to take a piece of that power and we're going to give it to the grid, and we're going to drive down the price of energy for Americans. And our objective is to drive it down 10% so that Americans have the benefit of the power we're going to build. The Koreans gave us $200 billion, so that's $750 between the two of them. Then the Koreans gave us another $150 billion to do shipbuilding. Add that to Taiwan's $500 billion, and the Commerce Department, which set all these up, is one busy place investing that money for the betterment of America, and that's on top of what Donald Trump talks about. Secretary, I think you're having a ball in this new job. My objective as a member of this cabinet is to have the best time, right? I want to be the cabinet member who has the best time working for Donald Trump. The American people will hopefully have the best time as well. Secretary, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Howard Letnick joining us. We'll be right back. You're watching Mornings with Maria, live from the World Economic Forum. New data shows U.S. oil and gas drilling permits surged 55% in just under a year. The Interior Department approved more than 5,700 permits between Inauguration Day and January 6th of the new year. Oil prices right now are trading at around $61 a barrel, up fractionally, as you can see here. The price of crude is at $61.88. The Energy and Interior Departments focused on cutting red tape to reshore American energy. But yesterday, a federal judge ruled that the administration's termination of Biden-era clean energy grants was unlawful, accusing President Trump of targeting Democrat-led states. Joining me now is U.S. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum. Secretary, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. A lot to get to. I want to start on these permits. Give our audience a sense of why all of those permits being approved is a positive, up 50+% in just under a year.
Well, President Trump promised to drill, baby, drill, and his policy of increasing an abundant supply of energy, creating energy dominance for America, is bringing home the goals of dropping inflation at home and bringing prosperity to Americans and bringing peace abroad. This is a double win for President Trump. When we're stronger with energy here, it lowers the cost of everything. The clothes on your back, the food on your table, the gas in your car, the home that you heat, all of those are driving President Trump breaking the back of inflation, but being energy abundant has allowed us to take the actions, whether it's with eliminating Iran's nuclear capability or arresting Maduro. All of those things possible because of President Trump's energy abundance, energy dominance agenda.
And what about this fight, energy versus environment, that the Democrats are talking about, and this judge saying that canceling the Biden-era policies was unlawful, Secretary?
Well, this has to do with the 5 very large offshore wind projects in the Northeast. There was a new security report that came out, classified by the Department of War in December. That indicated that there was absolutely potential national security risks once these things are completed and the blades are spinning because of radar interference. That was the basis for the stoppage of the work order on those projects right now. Well, discussions could continue between the Department of War and the developers of those offshore wind projects. But a judge ruled yesterday in favor of the Biden-era decision. Today, there's another hearing today in federal court. There's another one on Friday. There's 5 separate cases. So we'll have to see where things fall after these legal cases get through their first phase.
Secretary, what do you want to say about this block on critical minerals? I mean, China has been trying to bully the U.S. as well as Japan. What do you think is the fastest way or best way to break this dependence on China?
Well, President Trump and this administration very focused on not just drill baby drill, but map baby map and mine baby mine. We've got to get ourselves back in the mining industries in this country, and that includes the rare earth minerals and the critical minerals we need for automotive, for defense, for high tech. They're essential to everyday life today to have our capability here and have it be secure. So President Trump, again, using diplomacy around the world, building a compact of nations that can trade freely around critical minerals that already includes Japan, Korea, Australia, and others. I mean, this is there's a resolve among the free world to not get in this position where China can have a stranglehold on the minerals that they could. If they came within weeks earlier this year of shutting down every auto plant in the world, that just can't happen. We've got to get back in those businesses.
Yeah, it was very smart of the president to ensure that he was allied with all of those neighbors to China as well. We spoke with Chris Wright, your colleague on the program this week. Here's what he said, the Energy Secretary. Watch.
But the best answer with China is just better behavior. Be an economic player. Don't be an underminer of world order. Don't be a covert takeover agent of multiple countries. But I think China realizes that agenda doesn't fly with President Trump in the White House. Hopefully we'll steer those things in a better direction.
You are just at the center of this, Secretary, in this fight over energy prices, federal land control, and, of course, this fight with China. So we're watching it closely. Meanwhile, the president is taking on so much, the administration reportedly filed seizure warrants to take control of more oil tankers linked to Venezuela. U.S. military forces already seized 5 tankers to date, enforcing a blockade around the Latin American nation after the capture of Nicolas Maduro, dictator Maduro. Venezuela's state energy company reportedly boosting production after that takeover, reversing cuts as crude exports resume. What's your take here?
Well, this is, again, brilliant strategy by President Trump after the law enforcement action to take down the criminal who was leading an illegal government, Maduro. This is an opportunity Venezuela hasn't had for decades, which is an opportunity to be able to sell energy on the world market at global prices. And, of course, the U.S. now ensuring that this, the blockade, the embargo is going to work. The quarantine, and the United States is in charge of the sale and disposition of this Venezuelan oil. That's going to allow that oil, whether it's coming to refiners in the U.S., help lower price in the U.S., or if it's going on to the world market. This is going to be great for the American people, great for Venezuela, great for peace in our region, and great for building normal economic relationships with Venezuela.
I mean, Iran is also a major OPEC producer. I mean, when you're talking about oil, and oil prices have moved up on this conflict. You're talking about crude at $61 as you know, investors are wondering if there's going to be a threat to those exports and tighten global markets even further. What is your assessment of the backdrop there with prices now above 61?
Well, I think it's up on the unrest in Iran. We saw that when the actions that were taken in Venezuela, prices stayed low.
Yeah.
But I do think that what's going on in Iran is incredible. I mean, to think that there's an opportunity to see changes in leadership in Venezuela, Cuba, Iran in quick succession.
Absolutely.
And again, President Trump, he's like hitting triple bank shots with his eyes closed on the geopolitical use of energy diplomacy like no one we've ever seen, and it's just fantastic. The opportunity for American economic prosperity, the possibilities of world peace. I mean, this is a game changer. But what happens in Iran doesn't matter as much anymore because with North America, between Canada, the U.S., Venezuela, Brazil, the center of oil production is shifting from the Middle East back to the Western Hemisphere, and under President Trump's leadership, that energy diplomacy is going to continue to reap benefits for Americans for decades to come.
Well, that is really exciting and certainly a national security issue here. But Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be hosting officials from Greenland and Denmark at the White House today as the president pushes to acquire Greenland. I want to get your take here because President Trump posted on Truth Social moments ago, reiterating Greenland's importance for American national security and that NATO becomes even more effective if the island is in U.S. control. Delaware Senator Chris Coons is leading a bipartisan congressional delegation to the island this week, highlighting the bilateral ties between the U.S. and Denmark. But Greenland's prime minister is refusing to turn over sovereignty. He said in a press conference yesterday, quote, "We are now facing a geopolitical crisis. If we have to choose between the U.S. and Denmark here and now, we choose Denmark, NATO, and the European Union." Here's what happened when the president heard that. Watch this.
On Greenland, sir, the premier of Greenland said today, "We prefer to stay with Denmark." Do you see that as the final word? Who said that? The premier of Greenland.
Well, that's their problem. That's their problem. I disagree with him. I don't know who he is, don't know anything about him, but that's going to be a big problem for him.
Secretary, what do you think the president is referring to?
Well, I think that the strategy here and the opportunity for building a relationship between the United States and Greenland is a strong one. And there's a great history of this, of presidents with leadership. I mean, Thomas Jefferson with the Louisiana Purchase, what we saw when Alaska was acquired. And again, I would remind people the Interior Department is responsible for all of our affiliated states that we have around the world in the South Pacific and the Western Pacific, and our territories that we've got military bases like Guam in the Pacific, U.S. Virgin Islands. I mean, 14 time zones span across interior. And of course, Greenland, we need to remind people, think it's far away. It's closer to Washington, D.C. than Alaska is, certainly closer than Hawaii and any of the Pacific Islands that are affiliated with the United States, either as affiliated as states of their own independent or as U.S. territories with U.S. citizens. But I think there's a great opportunity here. I think President Trump, the greatest deal maker in the world. World leaders meet him. They like him. He's never met the premier of Greenland before. They'll be interesting to see how these talks go today, keep that conversation going. But from a strategic standpoint, from a national security standpoint, President Trump 100% correct with what's going on with Russia in the Arctic, what China, their influence up there, China building weather stations in Greenland. These aren't weather stations. This is about North American and European security. If you look at that map from the top of the world down, Greenland plays a critical role in protecting both North America and Europe from incursion from Asia. And President Trump's absolutely right. That needs to be in control of someone who's even stronger than NATO. That's the United States of America.
Yeah, so because of where it is, right? So close to Russia.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Meanwhile, back to your portfolio and the Interior Department expanding hunting and fishing access on American public lands unless otherwise required by law or public safety. Secretary, the department also notes recreational activities support a $1.2 trillion economic output for America. So this is also about economics here.
Well, it's the outdoor recreation industry. We've spent a lot of time with them. But as you say, this is an over $1 trillion industry for America, about 3% of employment. We're talking everything from recreational vehicles to sporting goods stores to hunting and fishing guides. It's amazing, and it's part of America's traditions. We head into Freedom 250, the celebration of America's 250th anniversary. All of these bureaus of the interior, from national parks, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Bureau of Indian Affairs, all of these organizations that represent opportunities for Americans to get outside, celebrate the plentiful, abundant, bountiful, incredible public spaces that we have. We want to make sure that we're expanding that hunting and fishing. I mean, hunting and fishing, and the anglers and the hunters, they're the world's best conservationists. They're the ones that pour their money and time into helping preserve these places, and it's a great economic cycle that we're doing that. And of course, as we do that, and as we expand the energy agenda, we keep leading the world. We've got the cleanest water, the best soil health, the cleanest air of any country in the world, and that's because of American ingenuity. So hats off to everybody in that industry, in the recreation industry, but also to our incredible energy industry, which is again setting records. We had a lease sale last week in the Permian. $220,000 was the price for 1 acre out of a 32,000 acre sale. $327 million coming into the Treasury and our partners from those sales. When we grow, when we started this top of the hour talking about drill baby drill, when we're drilling, we're putting money in the pockets of the U.S. Treasury, and we're creating opportunities to put dollars back into our outdoor spaces for the use of Americans. It's a win-win-win all the way around. President Trump leading the way on that.
Oh, great stuff there. Secretary, good to see you this morning. Thanks so much. We'll continue to watch your work.
Great. Thank you, Maria. Great to be with you
Secretary
always.
Doug Burgum joining us. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I think it's been a tyranny of about 25 years of trying to get the refining business to leave California. They've been putting in regulations and bureaucracy and taxes and programs to push us out of the state.
California has spent